Welcome to Beyond the Pod, presented by SodaStick.com.
Brunette, he moves, Brunette back in, he scores! Minnesota has upset the Colorado Avalanche! Andrew Brunette, the game-winning goal!
Here are your hosts, the second greatest scorer in Gopher hockey history, Pat Micheletti, and the second greatest hockey analyst on this podcast, Brandon Mileski.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Pod, as always brought to you by SodaStick.com. I'm Brandon Mileski and Pat Micheletti with me. Hi, Patrick.
Hello, Brandon. How are you?
Good. Decided to go guestless today because it's been a while since I've chatted with you, and we have lots of, I think, Minnesota Wild topics to discuss. So I figured let's just go without a guest and get through as many of these as we possibly can. We at the time of this taping, we're 6 games in. The Wild currently 2-3-1. They lose their first 3 games, giving up 20 goals during that stretch. Have gotten a little bit better over the last 3, going 2-0-1. So far through 6, what has been kind of your impressions of the squad?
Well, I didn't panic. I didn't like to see the number of goals given up, obviously. And it was only 3 games in. And so I didn't want to push the panic button because we know it's an 82-game season, and you know what they have coming back, and so, but I didn't like how loose they were. I love offense, you know that, but you have to have the right team to be able to play like that all the time. This team, they know, cannot win getting in shootouts every night, and so. I think they've tightened it up lately, which is how they have to play it all. You know, we're not in the 80s anymore where, you know, every game is going to be 7-6, 7-5, whatever. And it's that 200-foot game. Right. And so they needed to get back to that. And I think as of late, they have. Are they there yet? No. But it's been better.
You know, it's interesting you say, because I've kind of heard the coaches say the same thing. You know, you get the team will send out videos from the locker room after a game, or you know, judging Dean Evason's comments of, you know, we need to be a gritty, tough team, and that's different than last year's team, Pat. And I get that, you know, Kevin Fiala off the team can have a big impact on your style of play, right? Because he's a guy that could give you a second line of being able to go up and down the ice. But it's still interesting to hear that, given a lot of this team is the same team that was here last year.
You're right. And listen, I'm on board with all of the moves that they have made since Guerin has gotten here. I do think, though, that not re-signing Fiala it has an impact on this team. I say that for this reason. He's a name. He's an established name. He had 85 points. It's hard to replace 85 points. And, you know, you can have all the buzzwords to make up for it and all this, that, and the other thing. Well, but I still think they might look back someday and say, you know what, we should have kept him. Or try to replace him with that type of player. And I know the money, I know all that. We know what but ultimately, I still think there are things that could have been done. And look no further than right after the draft, they dump salary, right? They dump Talbot, they dump Kulikov. So I'm. You know,
well, they dumped Talbot, but they replaced that money with Fleury. But yes.
Well, but they were going to bring both back. Right?
Well, we don't know if that was coach, you know, if that's GM speak or if that was the plan all along. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, nonetheless. So anyway, but so when I look at their team, right, and if I'm the other coach on the other team, and I'm saying, you know, let's stop this line and we have a pretty good chance to win, I guess is my point.
Well, and to your point, that Kaprizov-Zuccarello line Oh, they've been really great on the power play. The power play has been a massive step up from what we've seen. Now, small sample size, and that can change.
Yep.
But with Zuccarello and Kaprizov and Boldy and Eriksson Ek and Kalyn Addison, I think has added a bunch on the power play. Power play has improved, but 5-on-5, Kaprizov and Zuccarello have not been good, specifically defensively. They've given up a ton of goals defensively. And, maybe that leads to your point of, maybe, especially with Greenway injured, all of a sudden that line's not as scary and dynamic as it once was.
Right.
And maybe other teams are saying, well, we don't need to worry about the Wild's depth anymore. We can just focus on Kaprizov and Zuccarello.
Right. There, one is -7, one is -6. And that's not good because yes, the power play much better and much better with that. Addison's really, really good. And we talked about this 2 years ago. 2 years ago, you and I talked about how's he going to help this team, and he can run a power play, and he can. He adds something to that power play that Spurgeon can't do, that Brodin can't do, and that Dumba can't do, and it's been so much better.
He looks different this year, Pat. And, obviously he was a young kid, so you're going to grow and you're going to mature. But I don't know if it's just the increased role. I don't know if it's boost from the GM, a boost of confidence from the head coach. Now he's moved up in the lineup 5-on-5 as well with Dumba being moved back. He's been great on the power play, but even 5-on-5, and he's going to have his flaws 5-on-5. I'm not going to act like, he's not the biggest, strongest guy. He's going to get pushed around in his own corners at times. But his puck moving ability, he just seems like he has a level of confidence with the puck on his stick that I did not see in his limited amount of time over the last 2 years.
And don't we see that in young kids, right? They come up here and they don't want to make mistakes. They know, they feel like if I make a mistake, I'm either in the press box or sent back down. Now he's got that confidence, like he's going to be here. They're not sending him anywhere. Unless they make a trade, but you know what I mean. And so all of a sudden, it's like a big sigh of relief. And now let me play my game. And
he's playing his game.
Yep. And that's the thing. Do what you do best. Do what you do best, and then work on the other things that you need work on. And he's been doing it.
Well, let's talk about another young guy then who I think is kind of going through the same thing, and that would be Marco Rossi. His first 2 games, he was on the 4th line, only played 4 minutes his second game, healthy scratch in the 3rd game, and then coming out of the healthy scratch, they decided to elevate him in the lineup and play him on the line with Matt Boldy. And, you look at his stats, Pat, and he's got 0 points through 5 games, and he also has a lot of things he needs to work on and needs to improve on. But I like that when he did get back in the lineup and got placed in that role, that something clicked with him where he said, I'm going to play my game. Because I felt like when we've seen him previously, he's played a little timid. Let's face it, he's going to get beat up around the boards a little bit, and he's not going to win battles all the time in those situations. But I feel like his puck handling, his distributing, even the game against Boston, he had a play from behind the net where he carried it out, got the puck taken away. Boston had a scoring chance. And you look at it and you go, man, that's a bad mistake by a young kid. But I like that he had the confidence to try that and play. And he'll learn, hey, I can't always do that in those situations. But it wasn't just a puck off the glass, let's get it station to station play. Like, it was him trying to make a play. And for me, a guy like that, he needs to be in that situation where he's playing that type of game, trying to make plays. And you're going to make mistakes along the way, but give him the freedom to do that.
You hit it right on the head. He started to be him again. And that I'll go back to Addison. It's like when Addison first came up, don't want to make a mistake, don't want to get pulled from the lineup, all those things. And you're thinking all the time. Coaches sometimes can overcoach, and instead of letting the player be the player, they do this, do that, do this, do that, do this, do that. And it gets in their head. And then that fear of making the mistake or not doing the 10 things that the coach wants me to do, instead of just being yourself and making plays. you and I both know Marco is very, very competitive, and he works really, really hard, and he loves the game, and he wants to win, and all that. For me, I don't want to overreact, good or bad, on him yet, because this is his first taste of it. How many times again did you and I talk about Eriksson Ek? Our number one pick. When is he going to emerge? Or, can he play at this level? All of that.
I thought the same thing on Kalyn Addison.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I guess, if the player is good, they wouldn't get drafted if they, at that level, at that high level. If they weren't good, it's really practicing patience with some of these guys. But but back to the point. But you got to let them be who they are to a certain extent too. And I think Marco will get more comfortable. And let's check him out 20 games from now if he's still getting the same amount of ice time. Because listen, here's the flip side of that. If you're going to be in that top 6 role, which he is right now, you have to produce.
Yep.
You have to, because if you don't, your team is not going to win. You need your top 6 forwards to produce for you, or you won't win games.
Well, and back to your original point of, you would wish the Wild and Bill Guerin had found a way to keep Kevin Fiala here.
Yep.
We've stated, or at least I've stated here for a while now, Pat, that when you lose Kevin Fiala, your only replacement ever that looks like to me is going to be Marco Rossi has to replace, to a certain extent, Kevin Fiala. Now, Boldy's going to improve, and Boldy might, Boldy will probably end up being the Kevin Fiala, and you need the Rossi to get to where Boldy was last year. But that's how you were going to replace. You take away Kevin Fiala's money, and really, out of anyone in your organization, Marco Rossi has to fill that void.
Yeah.
Now, to your point, we got to be patient with that. I don't know how long that's going to take. That might take 2 months. That might take 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Frankly, there's obviously a chance it'll never happen, right?
Right.
But they made the decision to go that route, and that means Marco Rossi has to fill that void at some point. But how long is that going to be? Who knows?
Yeah. And we're going to have to live with it for a while, at least until they get more money and they can hit free agency and go after one of the guys that may or may not be available. Because all I'm hearing out of the Wild or reading, and whether true or not true, because some stuff is real and some stuff is just, stirring the pot or whatever, is that they need another forward. I would agree that they do.
Yeah.
But is there going to be the right one available, and or are they really gonna go after one? We'll see.
Well, frankly, they need to, before they get that forward, put themselves in a position throughout the season where they are playoff contender, going to be in the playoffs. Because then once you get to the trade deadline, they do have $5 million to work with. And once you get to the deadline, $5 million is basically like, $10-12 million in terms of how much, because you're paying prorated portion of the contract. So they need to put themselves in that situation. Now, I want to talk about the defensemen. Obviously, we mentioned that the 20 goals given up in the first 3 games, and goaltending played a part in that. I would definitely say defensively, your forwards, I think, played a huge role in that. Kaprizov made multiple mistakes that ended up with pucks in your own net. But when you look at your core defensemen, I don't think Jonas Brodin has gotten off to the start we're accustomed to seeing. No. Matt Dumba has not played like we're used to seeing, and frankly, he's now gotten demoted. Jake Middleton, I think, has had some issues defensively. I think Spurgeon's just been okay. Kalyn Addison has been the one bright spot, but I don't ever expect him to be a defensive stalwart. So, you are going to get issues there. Goligoski's been in and out of the lineup. They finally get John Merrill back, and he's done some good things, but he's also made mistakes, had some bad penalties. And this is not, I'm not blaming everything defensively on the defenseman, because it's more that it's a 5-man group, it's a 6-man group, including the goaltending. But I do think there's some reason to be concerned there, because Jonas Brodin, I've never seen him look like this. And Matt Dumba, man, I don't know if he just has in his brain that he's going to be gone after this year and it's affecting him. I don't know what's going on, but there's some issues back there.
There are. And listen, Brandon, you're going to give up goals in this league because the players are that good and the league is that good. So I understand they're going to give up goals. It really irritates me when they give up easy goals.
Yes.
And I'll give you 3 examples. Kaprizov getting beat by Manson off the sidewall.
Yes.
Never should happen. If it was Drew Doughty, Adam Fox, Cale Makar, okay.
Yeah.
They're great.
That happens.
Josh Manson, no. A 2-on-2 against I don't know. I forget the team. Vancouver. Bo Horvat's goal. 2-on-2 should be easily defended. Dumba doesn't look at him. Easy tap in goal. Easy tap should not happen.
They almost scored a second one that exact same way too, if you remember.
Yep. And I don't care. The Rantanen goal against Gustafsson. McKinnon flips it in from the blue line. I don't care. I don't care because they work on everything in practice. You smother that puck. You don't let it hit your pad because it's gonna leave a rebound. You smother it. I'm not a goaltender. I'm not a goaltender coach, and I don't. But I would know to grab the puck, and it hit him. Rantanen, and then Rantanen beats his guy to the net, and it's easy goal.
Yep.
So those goals, Brandon, deflate you on the bench, and then you see the next shift, and that same jump is not there, and cause and effect, right?
Well, and especially those games you're talking about, the Wild were producing offensively, and despite being down in games, they were scoring big goals to get back into it, and then you give up the soft, easy one,
you're playing well in a game, and then you have control and all this, and at times in all of those games they did, and then they give up an easy one. That's hard. It's hard mentally to it's just like, oh, here we go, and then the attitude gets bad and all that. So eliminating the easy goals will go a long way.
But that was also why I didn't panic after the first 3 games, because I was looking at the goals against, going, this is so out of character for this team. Like, this is not sustainable. Like, a lot of those are very correctable mistakes.
Yep. And it seems like they're against Boston and Ottawa or Montreal, they look more engaged. They look more focused. They look more of attention to detail type team. And really, that's what it comes down to. Just take care of your responsibility and do it in a detailed and hard way. And I think we're starting to see that, not to where they want to be yet, but the signs are there.
All right, more Wild discussion in a second, but first I want to tell you about our sponsor on Beyond the Pod. That would be sodastick.com. Go to sodastick.com to get your original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. If you haven't seen it yet, you have to check it out. All their apparel screen printed here in Minnesota on super soft, super comfy shirts. You'll love it, and we're going to hook you up with 15% off your next order. So use the code KFAN for 15% off. That is sodastick.com. Original Minnesota sports-inspired goods. Use the code KFAN for 15% off your next order, and you have to get their new Fighting Saints hat that they have just released. A couple more Wild topics. Let's talk about some of the grinders on the team. I think one of the pleasant surprises, and I don't think there's a lot of negativity, and there's a lot of players we could go down the lineup and say they're not playing well, but I think Brandon Duhaime has gotten off to a nice start playing on the fourth line. I know he got elevated to the third line last game. 2 goals, 1 assist. He's had big goals. He's seemingly getting more breakaways than anyone on this team, which I would not have predicted. And I always have to preface it by saying small sample size, but the confidence looks there to me, and he looks a little bit better, like almost like he's improved and learned something from last year when it was kind of a tough stretch for him.
Well, let's go back to last year a little bit. I think he got it in the mindset, at least to me, Brandon, it looked like every fight or every shift he was looking to get in a fight a year ago. It just that sticks in my head. Every time I saw him or his name was mentioned, he was in a scuffle. And that, I know he's got, he can do it, but he's not a fighter, use your gifts. He can really skate. He can really drive hard to the net, and I think his confidence is coming up a little bit more now that he's been through the league 1 year. But that is one of those guys that is, you can't really look at him and say, well, he's got to get you 20 this year. But so throw that out. But he's got to chip in. And thus far, he has been doing that. And can he do it consistently will be the big question, or something I'll be looking at.
One guy who's been a line mate for a good portion of the season with him would be Connor Dewar. I must say, Pat, I'm not going to act like I love Connor Dewar. I kind of like him. He plays with speed. He skates. He plays with pace. He's not the biggest guy, but he plays more physical than his frame would lead you to believe. Like, he's not afraid to mix it up. He can kill some penalties for you. I think he's a solid, role player on your team.
Adds that element, that's for sure. And maybe they don't know yet exactly what they have with him, because he was an offensive type guy in Iowa. Well, Iowa's not the NHL, so can he be that here? Will he get a chance to be that here? I don't know, but yeah, I have, when I look at the lineup and Connor Dewar's in it, I have no problem with it. And you're right, he's got great speed and he can win draws, and so he may be that guy that just moves around an awful lot because you can trust him. So, but he's been fine.
All right, let's talk about some guys that a little concerned with at this stage. That would be your Marcus Folignos, your Ryan Hartmans. I know the question with these two was, they had career years. Can they return to those? And my thought going into the season was, well, we've seen this a couple years in a row out of Foligno, so that it would not surprise me if he put up those numbers again. Obviously, not having Greenway on that line has hurt to a certain extent, and who knows when the three of them get together, maybe everything returns. But he hasn't been the same. And Ryan Hartman, if you're playing with Kaprizov and Zuccarello, you should score. That line has not scored 5-on-5, and now he's been taken off that line multiple times already in a 6-game season.
Yeah, you got, hopefully, Ryan Hartman's been around a long time. He's a veteran, and it may be just a slump. But they're counting on him. He's got to be one of the guys, because he is in your top six. He's going to have to find his game. I think there were some signs against Montreal. It was better. And again, it's early, but if he doesn't, that's going to hurt. It's going to hurt the team. So, I think he knows it too. He knows it. He knows he's got to play better. He knows he hasn't been good. I think he's a smart player, and he's, as I said, he's a veteran. And so he knows that he's got to get better for him. And I think he will.
All right, we've gone this long without talking about the goaltending. Clearly, the two of them combined gave up a bunch in the first 3 games. I do think Marc-Andre Fleury has played pretty solid the last 3 games. I thought Boston, even though he gave up 4, was brilliant in Boston and single-handedly saved them a point and almost gave him a chance to get to a shootout. He was good against Montreal. I thought he was solid against Vancouver. We haven't seen a whole lot of Gustafsson other than coming in for Fleury in game 2, and then he gave up the 6 goals. Or maybe he gave up 5 against Colorado, and one of them was an empty netter. But they've kind of ridden Marc-Andre Fleury. He's playing better. I think that's a positive sign. Still don't really know what we have in the backup.
Hey, listen, going into the season, my biggest concern, Fleury might play 50. We know he's not going to win 50. And you have 32 others. If they're going to make the playoffs, and because 2 through 8, it's a lot of teams that are pretty even. Gustafsson is going to have to win you games. He's going to have to win you 10 to 12 games if this team is going to make the playoffs. And that's a concern. He's got to be better. Now they have to be a little bit better in front of him, all of that, because As we talk about, it's a 6-man unit, but you have to get wins from your backup goaltender, and that concerns me.
All right, let's move on to college hockey for a little bit before we go. Your Minnesota Golden Gophers still remaining atop the NCAA hockey poll. They are number 1 in the nation after they split with North Dakota last weekend. After they had split with Minnesota State Mankato the weekend before. St. Cloud State and Mankato have swapped in the rankings.
Yeah.
St. Cloud State went from 8 to 2. Mankato went from 2 to 8 after the Huskies swept Mankato. Your thoughts overall on the Gophers North Dakota series, and then the early great start for the St. Cloud State Huskies at 6-0.
Well, let's start.
I just threw a lot at you there. I'm sorry.
No.
I should have singular just stayed on one topic.
No, yeah, it's fine. But Minnesota, North Dakota, which is great to see. 3M at Mariucci sold out both nights.
Yes.
It was crazy. It was a great atmosphere both nights. Minnesota dominated North Dakota both nights. Drew DeRitter, the North Dakota goaltender, had 78 saves on the weekend. They outshot him 78 to 31 on the weekend, and he was the difference. Minnesota has three defensemen that if their NHL teams got on the phone today and said, we need you, you can play in our lineup tonight, we need you, they could do it. Jackson Lacombe, Brock Faber, Ryan Johnson are unbelievable. I mean, I'm telling you, unbelievable. And that's the key for Minnesota. Their decor is the best in the country. So it was a great series. St. Cloud and Minnesota State, worried about neither of them going forward. They're both obviously very well coached. St. Cloud gets the sweep, a controversy on Saturday night with a trip that led to the winning goal. But it's early. It's October. These teams are going to be different teams come January. But good starts for all of them.
You mentioned the three defensemen for the Gophers that could jump in right away, and we'll probably discuss this topic as we move along throughout the Wild season. But one of those is Brock Faber, who is now property of the Minnesota Wild after they traded Kevin Fiala to the Los Angeles Kings. I would have to imagine that Dumba's play means that at some point you could shop him, given it's the last year of his deal. Brock Faber, after the Gopher season is over, you seem to think he can jump right into the lineup. What kind of role do you think he could play in the NHL? Are you saying he could jump in the lineup and be just a third pairing guy who can play 10 minutes for you? Or do you look at him as, hey, this is a 17, 18-minute guy immediately this year?
Immediately. He could be in their top four right now. I'm telling you, a lot of people are going to look at his game and say, where's the offense? Well, he's on a team where you have Jackson Lacombe, who might be the best offensive defenseman in the country. And, Minnesota has other got Ryan Johnson and Kester and Luke Middlestead, who plays a power play. They don't play Faber on the power play. Why? Because he's eating other minutes throughout the game, and they play 7D. But Faber can play that 18 to 20 minutes a night and just eat minutes, not get beat. He moves the puck. He's a great skater. He's a smart player. And I'll go back and granted, the Olympics is not the NHL. I talked to David Quinn, Brett Larson, and Mike Hastings, and they told me we can't take this kid off the ice. And so, I'll listen to them. And
they seem to know what they're talking about.
They know what they're talking about. So I think he'll fit right in, and it'll be a great addition, like making a trade at the trade deadline. It's what they'll be getting come April.
All right, it's time as always. We finish every podcast with some stick taps. Pat, who do you got for your stick tap today?
Boy, Brandon, I'm going to let you go first, okay?
Well, I've got three. So
all right, geez, you got three. Go ahead.
I don't want to stomp on any of yours.
No, you're not. You won't.
All right, one, I'm going to give a stick tap to Phil Kessel, who broke the Ironman record. And I know there's controversy as to whether you think it's Ironman or not. But regardless, the guy has played 990 consecutive games breaking a record held by Keith Yandel in a very physical sport. So pretty impressive for a guy to play that long, and he's always on the ice. Stick tap number 2 for you, Pat. Jason Payne and Joel Martin, both are black coaches in the ECHL. And last night was the first time in the history of the ECHL, and believe it to be the first time in North American men's pro hockey, that 2 black coaches opposed each other. By the way, Payne's Cincinnati Cyclones defeated Martin's Kalamazoo Wings by a score of 2-1. And then my final stick tap goes to, and this is your son on Twitter, led me to seeing this one. Nick Perbix out of Elk River in St. Cloud State. He picked up his first NHL point last night in Anaheim for the Tampa Bay Lightning in their win over the Ducks.
I'm going to give women's hockey a little love, and I ran into her at the Gopher game a couple weeks ago, and she was inducted into the Hall of Fame at the university the same year I was, and she started. She was really the conduit of women's hockey in Minnesota, the first coach at the University of Minnesota, Laura Halderson. I know they had a nice picture of her at the last Gopher game, her and some of her teammates when they won their first championship. And it just, we should remember some of the people who really were the conduit to get that game going in the women's game and how far it's grown. And so my stick tap is to Laura Halderson.
Very worthy there, Pat. Thank you as always. We'll talk to you next week.
You too, Brandon. Have a great week.
All right. He's Pat Micheletti. I'm Brandon Mileski. This has been another episode of Beyond the Pod. As always, it is brought to you by sodastick.com. We will talk to you next week right here on Beyond the Pod. Bye.